You know, the best step in reinventing oneself is to look in the mirror and to make a change. I can't. The Godzilla series is one of the most versatile film franchises in history. Throughout the 70 years of it, there have been countless times where Godzilla has been rebooted, retold, and reinvented. There are several examples of this. 1955 saw the release of Godzilla Raids again, and that began the whole monster-on-monster action. 1971's Godzilla vs. Hedorah had Godzilla flying. 1972's Godzilla vs. Gigan had Godzilla talking. There are so many more instances of Godzilla being reinvented for good or for bad. But by far the most drastic and biggest departure that the franchise has ever taken, in my opinion, is 2016's Shin Godzilla. At the time, Shin Godzilla was the first Japanese-made Godzilla movie in almost 12 years. The movie beforehand, Final Wars, was Godzilla's last hurrah in Japan. After that, he only made a cameo in 2007's Always Sunset on 3rd Street 2. But before Shin Godzilla, Godzilla made his grand debut after a decade of hiding in Legendary Pictures' reboot in 2014. Overall, it was okay. Godzilla was back, and that's all that really mattered to me. I waited so long since Final Wars, and now that he is back, that's all that I really cared about. So after Legendary's reboot with Godzilla back and his name now being remembered, what better time than to announce another movie? In December of 2014, Toho came out and stated that they were going to produce a brand new Godzilla movie with production set for summer and for it to be released in 2016. I remember this very vividly. In middle school, I would sometimes stay after to use the computers and such for projects, and I'd always be searching for information about maybe they're going to announce more plans for Godzilla 2. My jaw dropped when not only there was going to be another Godzilla film faster than anticipated, but it was also going to be made in-house in Japan. The first in over a decade.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!
To say that this was big news is an understatement. For years, Toho had brushed Godzilla off so that he could rest. And now with him being more popular than ever, it was time to reawaken him. Questions and debates began almost immediately. Which monster will Godzilla fight? Are they going to use Suitmation? What will the story be about? Will it continue off of any other Godzilla films? To say that the community was in a frenzy would be an understatement. Personally, I was very, very excited. I wonder who Godzilla would fight, or what he would look like. Maybe Godzilla vs. Deathla would come back, or that rumored Hedorah sequel for so long. It could be anything at this point. The film began to take shape, though, after some time once filming began on September 6, 2015. Toho then was starting to release things like a picture of Godzilla's footprint and stating that this incarnation of Godzilla would exceed the height of 2014's, making it the biggest, the baddest, and the tallest Godzilla ever put to film. Toho also released the title of the film, Shin Godzilla. Originally, I was disappointed with the title, but it's since grown on me over time. I love the mystery of it and the fear that it can strike. Producer Akihiro Yamauchi stated that the reason Shin Godzilla was chosen was because of the multiple different meanings like true, new, or God. So it's to give off the revival or the rebirth of the franchise. Filming also wrapped in October of 2015, and this is when we started to get more information, like how this Godzilla would indeed be portrayed entirely by CGI.
So you are yourself, but you're just a fake version of yourself.
Yeah, I remember a lot of people being pretty upset about it not being a practical man in a suit. Japanese Godzilla was always a guy in a suit, except for a few shots in later movies. It was the tradition, and this was shedding that mold. A lot were wary, even if the CGI would look good. It was sort of half and half. I was disappointed that it wasn't a suit, but at the same time, I wasn't raising my pitchfork yet. But if that wasn't enough of a change, people were not yet ready because we gotta look at what Godzilla would finally look like in the movie.
Grandma always said I was a handsome boy.
Godzilla in this movie was set to be the most terrifying version of the character, with the design taking on a wildly different approach than anything we had ever seen before. It looked like his body had been turned inside out, his mouth was enlarged, his teeth jagged and shark-like. His arms now were almost non-existent. Overall, the design made everyone take a step back and pause. What was this Godzilla movie going to be about now? We got a trailer finally in April of 2016, the Japanese one. And it looked so weird. It was mysterious and exciting at the same time. All the people who complained about the CGI Godzilla were immediately silenced. This proved that not only can Godzilla work well with CGI, but Japan can produce better looking effects with a smaller budget. I think my only issue is that this confirmed Godzilla would be alone in this outing and be the main villain of the story. But how long would we here in America have to wait? Would we get a theatrical release, or would we have to wait for a Blu-ray? Well, we didn't have to wait too long, with San Diego's Comic-Con confirming that it would indeed have a theatrical release, being renamed Godzilla Resurgence, but then would later be retitled back to its original Japanese title, Shin Godzilla, at Toho's insistence. Now we were cooking, with a limited one-week release scheduled and a new trailer on top of that. To say that I was excited would be an understatement. Shin Godzilla, like I said, would be only released for 1 week in American theaters. So with it being an event, I thought my pal Jason, his dad, would want to come. On July 29, 2016, Shin Godzilla would debut in Japan to a critical and commercial success. It was the most successful Japanese Godzilla film at that point, and it was nominated for all sorts of rewards. It even took home Best Director of the Year and Picture of the Year at the Japan Academy Film Prize. That was exciting to hear it did that. Going into the movie though, I thought that it would have an English dub. This was the first movie since Godzilla 2000 to be released in theaters, and it was dubbed with some changes, along like the ones like 1985 and the original Gojira. There was nothing telling me that this wouldn't be changed a little bit or would not have an English dub. Us four got to the theater for opening night, and I remember I couldn't sleep. My dad was excited, Jace was excited. They wouldn't stop asking me if it would be in English, and I said, yeah, they've done that in the past. The movie started, and... Uh-oh.
Yeah, I remember us going to go see Shin Godzilla. You were like, it's only going to be here a week. They localized it. You know, you can even bring your dad along. It's going to be great. And so we all go to the theater. First foreign film, and we're like, at least it's in English. And I think they spoke one line of English dialogue in the whole movie. It was 100% in Japanese. They had these ugly yellow subtitles the entire time, but nevertheless, I think we had a great time, and it was a great movie all around. I remember it fondly.
Yeah, so maybe I was a little bit too excited, but to be fair, this was the first foreign film I had seen in theaters, and I didn't know that they showed other languages than English in theaters. So that's my bad. But it does make for a funny story. Walking out of the movie, though, when the movie was over, I felt kinda mixed, but positive, sort of how I felt about Legendary's take on Godzilla. While Shin Godzilla was a bit mixed for me coming out, there are a few contributors for that for the first time. For one, the subtitles. This movie is terrible with subtitles, especially the theatrical version we watched. There would be Japanese subtitles under American subtitles with different colored subtitles and other subtitles over those, and with the rooms in the chat changing every 4 seconds. The first time watching this movie was a bit chaotic and confusing. Also, for Godzilla's grand Japanese return, I thought that some things that were changed were just a bit too much, such as Godzilla's lasers. I didn't mind the atomic breath and the lasers that came out of his mouth, but the spine lasers and the tail lasers were a bit too much in my opinion. They're cool, but I don't agree with those being added traits to Godzilla. I also, at the time, didn't really like the story. I thought it was a bit boring and confusing, and the third act really dragged too when Godzilla wasn't around. The Godzilla scenes I loved, however. Seeing this movie in the theater was an amazing treat. I'm glad that we got to. The experience and how it was a pretty full theater, it wasn't packed as much as the fan screening for later with -1, but it was decent enough to not feel alone or weird. In fact, Shin Godzilla did better than Funimation and Toho had expected and extended the release throughout October. In the end, Shin Godzilla grossed worldwide $78 million off of a budget of just $8 million. The highest grossing Japanese Godzilla film at the time. Watching the movie now, let me tell you, I'm not one of the ones that think that this is one of the best Godzilla movies. It's probably not even in my top 10, but it's a very, very good movie. My thoughts have changed over time from mixed to way more positive. While this isn't the Godzilla movie I was hoping for, I do think that it's very unique and it's one of the best iterations of the character. It's impressive how this movie is almost 10 years old and the computer graphics still look fantastic, better than any of the MonsterVerse movies. Sure, there's a few scenes like when Godzilla evolves for the first time or when he falls, it can look a bit off and the motion isn't quite right, but for the most part, this holds up stupendously. The beginning when the first form of Godzilla is smashing cars and boats, that still looks great. Remember, we're talking about an $8 million production. The camera work around Godzilla is some of the best that the franchise has had. Long takes, wide shots, and no shaky cam. I love shots like the one that looks like it was shooting out of a moving car, or ones where Godzilla's way in the background. The scaling of Godzilla here is great. When you see Godzilla for long periods of time. We don't get teased as bad as we did in 2014, but Godzilla still only shows up for a measly 18 minutes of the film. Now, that's 10 minutes longer than the 2014 film. However, I'm kinda getting sick of waiting for these movies for 5 to 6 years now, and Godzilla hardly shows up. Now recently that's been fixed a little bit with the new Empire or -1 where the monsters have a lot more screen time and hopefully that continues, but with this movie, it's a bit of a drag. When it comes to the look of Godzilla, I still really like it and I love the idea of Godzilla evolving over a movie. But I do have my nitpicks. I think its arms and his hands are still way too small and tiny. I wish they got boosted a little bigger later down the road. Another thing is the eyes. Sometimes it can make for a scary shot, but other times it can look a bit goofy. I still hold to the opinion that while I love Godzilla having this new way to shoot fire with him igniting it and then it turns into a laser, I don't like the lasers coming out of the spines or his tail. I just think it's a bit too weird and different for my liking. I also think it makes Godzilla just a little bit overpowered. I also think that Godzilla should have had a unique roar for this movie. Reusing old roars is okay, but for how drastically different this Godzilla is, reusing the old roars just seemed really off to me. But with that being said, I still really like the third form and the ending. I'll tell you, people were so confused at the ending, with it showing Godzilla could have evolved even further with Godzilla humans. I really liked that stinger of an ending, and I remember the theater going, What does that mean? As for the story of Shin Godzilla, now being able to watch it with an English dub is much easier to understand the characters, the locations, and the story. While it's not my favorite because I tend to like a bit more the goofier side of Godzilla, I still think it's a really strong story. It's definitely the most realistic depiction of Godzilla and the government coming to action against him. It's not as simple as, oh, there's a giant tail in the water, get the military guns out there. They go through every possible discussion of handling it and the cause and the effects until it's way too late. For instance, they'll ask, is the footage real or is it fake? Is it going to be a threat to our city? What's the damage that we're looking at? They go through everything to get a read on what Godzilla is. That's why this was so confusing the first time with subtitles, because it changes places, peoples, and rooms almost every few seconds. If they want to shoot off a type of military tech, they have to go through the Vine network and all the red tape of it. It's not as simple as Godzilla's here, let's blow him up. I also think I appreciate the most of seeing how Japan suffers in this movie and how it gets affected. The death toll, the traffic, the trains, and how the news plays a part in all this. How information is relayed to people, how information can be considered truthful 1 minute and then get disproven a second later. How people can leak government information or how they can get backstabbed. How someone in a position of power, if they get killed, who's the next to take over? Almost everything that you can think of in this movie is explained and answered. Shin Godzilla is a political thriller first, with Godzilla as the natural disaster. It's exciting, but definitely watch this in your own dubbed language so that you don't get as much whiplash. I think also what I love the most about this movie is the original score. Not the reused music, because while it's cool that some of these tracks haven't been used in ages, they didn't go the full mile, sadly, on re-recording or remastering them. So they're in monotone, and they don't really sound that great if I'm being honest. But the original stuff here that's recorded is incredible. Persecution of the Masses and Who Will Know are just works of art, and pure Godzilla classics in my book now. I can't think of Shin Godzilla without these pieces. They added a lot to the horror element of this Godzilla, and I remember listening to these two in class after watching the movie. Shin Godzilla is definitely quite a hard movie for me to put into words about why I think it's brilliant, but also having mixed feelings on it. While the story is amazing, there's nothing making me want to watch this version of Godzilla over and over and over again. I love how realistic this depiction of Godzilla is and some of the stuff that they did with him, but is this in my top 10? No. I still appreciate it, and I think it was cool, even so now that we can have the best of both worlds with America and Japan producing Godzilla movies, it just means that we don't have to wait as long as we did after 2004. However, if you're new to the franchise, I definitely recommend this as one of the first Godzilla movies you watch. Shin Godzilla is great, and after seeing how someone can reinvent themselves for the better and for everyone else's benefit, I think it's time that I do the same. I think I should go out and interact with society. I think I should go out and make some more friends. You know what? I'm gonna start right now. That is not what I had in mind.